Hey, if you're doing business in Romania, this is one explainer you really can't afford to skip. Today, we are diving deep into Romanian service contracts. We're talking about what they are, what they absolutely must include, and why, well, why getting it wrong can be a spectacularly expensive mistake.
So let's just jump right in with a pretty serious question. Take a second and think about the service contract you're using right now. Is it an asset, something that's protecting your business? Or is it a ticking time bomb, just waiting to go off? Because under Romanian law, that difference is absolutely massive.
And this is why it matters so much. 100,000 Romanian leu. That's the potential fine for having a single unfair or what they call abusive term in your contract. Yeah, for just one clause. The stakes are incredibly high. So today, we're going to make sure you understand all the rules of the game.
So let's get into our first section here. The thing is, for a lot of businesses, being non-compliant isn't something they do on purpose, but it is a dangerously common and very costly legal mistake. Let's break down what we're actually talking about.
Okay, so what is a service contract in the eyes of Romanian law? Well, it's pretty much any agreement where you provide a service, could be telecom, banking, maintenance, you name it, to a consumer, and they pay you for it. Simple, right? But all of these are governed by some very specific laws, especially Government Order 21/1992, which lays down some really strict rules for consumer protection.
So, do you need a written contract for every single little thing? I mean, it's always a good idea, but the law is crystal clear. It is absolutely mandatory in 3 very common situations. As you can see, if the service has recurring payments, if it lasts longer than a month, or if it's worth more than 100 lei, you have to have a formal written agreement. No ifs, ands, or buts.
All right, so how do you make sure your contract is actually compliant? Well, this is the real meat of our explainer today. We've got a clear 12-point checklist for you based directly on Romanian law to make sure your contract is totally sound. Let's walk through it step by step.
We're going to break this down into 3 parts, and let's start with the absolute basics. Part 1 covers the foundational stuff that every single service contract needs. Think of this as the who, what, when, and how much.
Now, what's really crucial to get here is the level of detail required. For party identification, it's not enough to just write down names. You need their full legal identifiers, the CUI, everything. The service description has to be exact, no vague language. For pricing, you have to disclose every single cost, every fee. And of course, the contract duration needs to be spelled out perfectly. There is just no room for ambiguity here.
Okay, once you've got those basics locked down, we move on to part 2. I like to call this section the rules of engagement. This is all about how you interact with the customer, what happens when things need to change, and what their rights are while the contract is active.
You'll notice a theme here. It's all about fairness and transparency. You can't just change things on a whim. The law says you have to give proper written notice. And that third point, consumer protection, that's huge. This is where you have to include the consumer's 14-day right to withdraw. And finally, you have to be totally upfront about liability and warranties. It's all about setting clear expectations for everybody involved.
And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, Part 3. This part covers all the legal formalities and some really key safeguards that protect both you and your customer. These are the things that make sure the contract isn't just complete, but also fair and enforceable.
These last 4 are critical. You've got to outline how you'll handle disputes, you have to protect their data under GDPR, and of course you provide a signed written copy. But let's all just zoom in on that one in the middle, no abusive clauses. This is the big one, folks. So what's an abusive clause? Well, it could be something that lets you change the price whenever you want without letting the customer cancel. Basically, anything that creates a major imbalance against the consumer can trigger that massive 100,000 lei fine we keep talking about.
Which brings us right back to the consequences. Now that you've seen the 12 requirements, let's look at the specific penalties you're facing if you don't meet them. And believe me, the Romanian Consumer Protection Authority, the ANPC, does not mess around.
Here it is, the official fine structure. Forgetting a mandatory element might cost you up to 4,000 lei, but including an abusive clause, look at that jump. The penalty skyrockets, starting at 20,000 and going all the way up to 100,000 lei. And for widespread problems, well, the fines get even bigger.
And this chart just says it all, doesn't it? Look at the tiny little bar for a simple mistake versus that absolute skyscraper for an abusive clause. The financial risk is on a completely different level. This is clearly what the authorities are laser-focused on.
And then there's this number, 4%. For the most severe cases, especially the ones that affect a whole lot of consumers, the penalty can be up to 4% of your company's entire annual turnover. Just let that sink in. That's a figure that can seriously jeopardize a business of any size.
So, after seeing all those risks, let's bring it all together. How do you secure your business and make sure your contracts are completely rock solid? It all comes down to a few key actions.
So what do you need to take away from all this? It really boils down to 4 simple rules. 1. Just always use a written contract, period. 2. Use that 12-point checklist as your guide for every single one. 3. Actively go hunting for and get rid of any clause that feels even a little bit one-sided or unfair. And 4. Remember the numbers. Never, ever underestimate the financial risk of getting this wrong.
Which leaves us with this one last question, bringing us right back to the beginning. After everything we've covered, take another look at your own business. Is your current service contract an asset that protects you, or is it a hidden liability, just waiting to cause a major problem? The answer now is in your hands.